All right, and we are live. It's Larsen Live. It is September 24th. We opened up with Paul Engemann's Push It to the Limit. Because why? Because the Venezuelan government has been confirmed to be dumping its prisoners and mental patients in America, just like Cuba did in the 80s. It's the Mariel Boatlift 2.0. Rick reminds me of the Internet 1.0 days, memes like safety not guaranteed. I wonder if that man ever did do his time travel expedition. And also, this song really reminds me about the paradox of the '80s, in that the decade was allegedly, I should say, so homophobic, and yet somehow it was also the gayest decade imaginable. Just in 1 second, I gotta blow my nose. Yeah, I don't know why we fell for this whole thing again. Now, of course, I have nothing against people who come here legally and follow the rules and stuff, but clearly these people won't be doing that. It's because of these damn do-gooders. We're like, oh my god, we need to open up all the borders for those poor innocent puppy dogs, my surrogate children. You know what? The problem with society is that not enough people suffer the consequences of their actions. So, yeah, I can understand why people were cheering for the illegals being shipped to Martha's Vineyard, who they got rid of in less than 48 hours after giving them some cold cereal for their trouble. I mean, obviously, I don't like the idea of people being used as hot potatoes being shipped back and forth as pawns, but, I understand the appeal. That's all I'm going to say. Also, it's kind of a shame that I had to play Push It to the Limit because it is, of course, September 24th. And if it was just 3 days earlier, I could have played some Earth, Wind, and Fire. Body, A, say, do you remember? Body, A, dancing in September. And, yeah, well, let's leave behind the fun of 70s and 80s pop music and then talk about the terrible, terrible world we live in. In other words, welcome to part 4 of the series about the agonizing pain in which I live every day. Yeah, I love making Simpsons references my students don't understand. Yes, what's in the news today? Canada turns to euthanasia to solve poverty, says a headline. In other words, people who are moderately ill or disabled but living in crushing poverty are apparently railroaded into euthanasia. And for the record, I support euthanasia being legalized because it's honestly not like you can stop people from killing themselves. But again, there's allegedly they're really pushing it on people, allegedly. Apparently, this is something that disabled Canadians have been talking about for years, disability advocacy groups, but nobody listened. Tim Stanton, director of the Canadian Institute for Inclusion and Citizenship at the University of British Columbia, said the country's uniquely permissive euthanasia laws were probably the biggest existential threat to disabled people since Action T4 in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. I think that's a bit of an overreaction, but yeah, euthanasia should absolutely be a right, but it shouldn't be encouraged. It should only be provided if the patient asks for it. No ifs, ands, or buts. Boy, I'm phlegmy this morning. And I know exactly why it is. It's because I go to the gym on Thursdays, which means I have to bike there immediately after work out, and then bike home, which means I'm cramming huge amounts of protein into my mouth at like 8:30 or 9 at night, which is why I don't sleep well. And when I don't sleep well, my body violently reacts to the whole lack of sleep, and I get all mucusy. I gotta find a way to square the circle here. But anyway, let's leave Canada and go to America. But first, let's look at some comments. Okay, let's see. Pony Throat says, pushing it to the limit like your car accelerator when you see children crossing the road. Yeah, that's something you got to do. C-Punk Messiah, discussing the whole 80s paradox, says there's lots of closeted homosexuality and hyper-masculine homoeroticism. I mean, yeah, like I've made a joke about how the 80s was apparently a homophobic decade, with the reaction to the AIDS virus, that Reagan did, which is all true. But then conversely, This is a decade where every man was walking around in little tiny shorts and playing with his He-Man action figures. So I question how homophobic the 80s really was. Hey, Pointy Throat says the Canada line for traumatized veterans is a recording of the Shia LaBeouf "Just Do It" speech. Yeah, I've always kind of liked how Shia LaBeouf, can't actually act well if he's in movies that nobody cares about, but mainstream movies, he kind of sucks the big one. Mitchell Valentino says he's here and he's listening. Well, thank you, sir. Anyway, in American news, gay rights icon Fred Sargent was beaten and robbed by some trans and non binary people. Who is Fred Sargent? I didn't know who he was, but apparently he was at the Stonewall riot in '68. He organized the first gay pride parade in New York City in 1973, so he's probably a pretty big deal in that community. And he got stomped out by a group of his brethren. Why? Because he was holding up certain signs at the Pride whoop-de-doo in Burlington, Vermont the other day. What did his signs say? One said, blackface, woman face, hashtag no thank you on one side, and gay not queer, hashtag no thank you on the other side. In other words, his signs were making firm his identity as a gay man rather than just a generic queer identity. And he was criticizing transgenderism as what I've always said it was, for a lot of cases, essentially a performance art piece that is the female equivalent of blackface. And I guess we can lump drag in there too. Although, I'm sure somebody could correct me on this, but the line of where drag stops and where trans starts is kind of vague. Like I know Ed Wood being just because you like dressing up in women's clothing doesn't mean you're gay. I saw Glenn or Glenda. I know, but again, it's a spectrum. Is all I'm saying. Beware the big green dragon on your doorstep. Anyway, but yeah, I'm not the only one who's noticed this. That a lot of this is sort of performative, shall we say? And apparently, this gay man noticed that too, and his brethren were not happy about it. The queer trans activists didn't take this well, and they beat up a 75-year-old man. One of his attackers in the picture has noticeable needle tracks in his arm, just FYI. You know, I I wonder why I keep referring to like NBs and trans people and like all these kind of weirdo spectrum people as like Hellraiser people when I refer to the TQ pluses. The more I see of them, the more the movie Hellraiser does seem appropriate. I'm sweaty. We're gonna tear your soul apart. Yes, I have seen NBs and other assorted queers that literally look like the Cenobites, and I don't understand why anybody would want to look like that. Isn't this exactly what I talked about in that one video I did? There's a low-level civil war going on in the LGBTQ plus community over basic identity politics. It's about this idea that the mainstream queers, the LGBs, are hogging the spotlight. They're crowding out the Hellraiser people and ruining their lives with their sexual apartheid and their unsympathetic genital preferences. And in contrast, the quote unquote mainstream queers feel that the others are blocking them out, overriding their identities into one generic queer identity, and of course, forcing them to have sex with people they don't want to have sex with. This can all be illustrated with the whole flag debacle. The gays had a nice rainbow flag. It looks nice, it's well designed. You can pretend it's like a flag celebrating the Incan military if you want, because their symbol was the rainbow. But then all the other groups put their stupid colors into it. Now it's just this awful mishmash that would get you a F in any, freshman visual design course. Clearly, the creativity and fashionable designs and aesthetic designs are only done by gay men, clearly. It's the LGBs versus the TQ plus barbecues. I mean, you all know that I am, of course, generally libertarian, small L about this sort of thing. Let people do what they want, as long as they're not hurting people. The problem here being that people are being hurt, whether it be, forcing people to have sex with people they don't want to have sex with, or mugging and jumping a 75-year-old man in the street. Regardless of his orientation, a 75-year-old man should be able to walk the streets and not fear getting a beat down. From what I gather, this rift in the LGBTQ plus community isn't being sewn up anytime soon, so expect to see more of this as older gay icons get beaten by the new gang. They've done this before, haven't they? Many, many times. Yeah, I don't think Clive Barker intended for his magnum opus, Hellraiser, to be so applicable to the gay community, but here it is. Then again, Clive Barker is gay, so maybe he did. I mean, man rape is a major theme in several of his works, actually. 1 second, please. Anyway, this break of Larsen shoves cough drops into his mouth is a good time to look at some comments. Moctimus Prime says, I was a child of the 80s from Brooklyn. We didn't even think of playing with Thundercats of being gay. Well, I mean, Thundercats aren't really gay. Like, He-Man is super gay. And, like, again, with the 80s, it's like, I refuse to believe that the decade that made Top Gun, like, a box office smash hit, didn't realize the homoeroticism going on. Like, nobody noticed in the midst of all this, tiny short wearing and Top Gun and He-Man that this is all kind of gay. Okay, let's see. Ponythroat says, yeah, there's a spectrum at playing the trans community. Yes, there sure is. Hey, Biff Slankovich says, talk about what counts. We're all facing nuclear holocaust, breakdown of the judicial system, America slipping into the meat grinder. Yeah, I'm going to get to that stuff, all right? Okay, Ponythroat says, if you could post images on YouTube, I would post the something anal vor pride flag. That's wonderful. With all due respect, Biff Stankovich, I really don't think there's going to be nuclear war. I don't think Putin's that dumb. I mean, I'm going to get to the Ukraine stuff. Don't you worry. But yeah, speaking of Hellraiser, Pinhead now has an emoji on Twitter. You made it, big guy. And yes, they're making a new one, as Ponythroat said. Or wait, what was it Ponythroat? It was, yes. Yes. Pinhead is going to be played by a trans woman. I mean, I don't really have high hopes for this new Hellraiser because it's a new Hellraiser. Look, I say this as somebody who adores the first two Hellraisers. The other ones all suck. Like, guys, it's been 10 movies, not counting the new one, and 8 of them were shit. 2 and 8 record, guys. Like, that is a losing record. You think you'd get the hint at some point. I mean, 3 and 4 were okay, I guess, but they're completely superfluous. Like, they're entirely irrelevant, but they're competently made, I suppose. Anything interesting about the franchise ended with the second one, and I'll tell you why. It's the same thing that happened with Halloween. They want to change it up from all, ongoing movies, and the dumbasses watching were like, no, I just want the same shit over and over again. Like, everybody was so mad about Halloween 3 because it didn't have Michael Myers, and they demanded he come back. Then it all ultimately culminated with Michael Myers fighting Busta Rhymes in a webcast. No, I take that back. That moon-faced hack Rob Zombie rebooted Halloween, and it culminated with Michael Myers literally being an autistic boy who throws temper tantrums over a toy train. Yeah, way to strip your boogeyman of any mystery, Rob Zombie. He's just a sped throwing temper tantrums with tard strength. I mean, every horror movie franchise kind of hits the skids sooner than later. It just becomes a bunch of goofy nonsense, like Jason goes to space, or Freddy Krueger becomes like serial killer Bugs Bunny. I mean, I guess you could put Child's Play in there too, but I mean, I feel those are always kind of a tongue in cheek sort of franchise. Then again, the fact that Chucky is part of WWF canon is pretty goofy. And in case you're wondering, there was a period of about a year with me and my friends where just screaming Leprechaun in the Hood was a running joke with us. Yeah, check out Leprechaun in the Hood. Check out Warwick Davis's rap number at the end of that one. The little dude's got bars. Yeah, there's some fly girls in that scene who can't dance worth a lick. I don't know why you would hire women to dance when they can't dance. And somehow Warwick Davis keeps up his fake Irish accent while rapping, and God help me, he's pretty good. Yeah, Hellraiser. Yeah, that second one, it's clearly got Pinhead, which is to say Captain Spencer of the BEF, die, but he redeems his soul in the process. Julia Cotton was clearly intended to be the new ruler of Hell, and presumably would have become a female Pinhead. The Pinhead persona is an entity that possesses people. I don't know why this is so difficult to understand, New World cinema. And then I got to the point where they're literally taking just slap ass horror scripts that had nothing to do with anything and just shoving Cenobites in at the last minute, like literally the last minute. Like, what the hell was that one where there's like a video game and they're like taking over the internet or something? So, yeah, I wish the best of the new Hellraiser, but I don't have high hopes. And yeesh, yeah, I usually do pop culture at the end, but I got a bit carried away. Anyway, let's look at some comments. Okay, let's see. C Punk Messiah says, I'm a bisexual myself. I never felt the need to wave a flag or wear the colors. I'm secure enough in my sexuality. Yeah, I mean, do what you want or do who you want. But, I just don't see the need to be all celebratory and performative about it. Pony Throat says, I liked Hellraiser 4 Bloodline. It's the best Alan Smithy movie. Again, like, Hellraisers 3 and 4 are competently made, but they're entirely superfluous. They're just pretty generic horror films. They don't have sort of like the overarching, mythos of the first two. Rick says, I'm wondering if the 80s used the logic where if men are tough, they aren't gay. Like prison logic. I mean, maybe. But then again, I've always kind of thought like maybe it's just the 80s were so, it was just free flying cocaine and steroids. So maybe it was like, they didn't realize what they were doing. Everybody was just having sex with everybody. Ponyfoot says, have you ever seen the biblical theory of an autist parting from his trains? Yes, I have. Rick wrote an elevator pitch for Saw in space. I mean, they all go to space at some point. And Detective 5 says at least Leprechaun embraced its goofiness. Yeah, even from the beginning, it was always kind of meant to be a bit of a joke. Also, YouTube is offering the first Leprechaun free with ads. And the thumbnail picture is literally just Jennifer Aniston's face. Which, I mean, I highly doubt she believes that one on her resume. But yeah, let's leave pop culture behind and slasher movies in North America, and we'll go to Europe. So, how's about that Ukraine war? The most popular search in Russian Google is how to leave the country. Putin is also calling for a partial mobilization to increase manpower, and the people are protesting this in response. I mean, even from the beginning, I can't help but feel that many Russians were kind of half-assing this war, considering that essentially Ukraine is to Russia what, like, Canada is to America. They are their cultural cousins. Russians see Ukraine as Russia Junior, similar to how Americans see Canada as, like, America Junior. I mean, if America invaded Canada in 2022, I don't imagine there would be much enthusiasm about it. I mean, that's the impression I got from that Russian DM from Coney Island I briefly dated before she mentioned, oh yeah, by the way, Larsen, I have a son. Yeah, thanks, Nadia. And no, that's not her name, but I don't want to drag real people's names into this. Surprisingly, you know who's producing pro-Russian propaganda? Motherfucking Jeff Munson. Jeff Munson here! You watch people get fucked for free? Yes, that's former UFC fighter, title contender. I don't think he was ever a champion. Let me see. Yeah, he was never the champion. He challenged for the championship against Tim Sylvia. But yeah, he was never a champion. He was just a championship contender. Yeah, Jeff Munson, who currently lives in Russia and holds Russian citizenship and is producing documentaries justifying Russia's claims to the Donbass. And yes, that one advertisement he did for Don King, like you get fucked for free. Yeah, that will always be his greatest legacy in the sport. And if I'm in a bad mood, like I'll watch that. Like that perks me right up. But yeah, anyway, speaking of malevolent government programs and propaganda, the CIA has a podcast. Yes, it does. The Langley Files, hosted by William Burns. And yes, when I saw the name William Burns, I was like, the first thing I thought it was, I don't know if Fire Marshal Bill had a podcast, but no, it's not that William Burns. Yeah, I'm totes going to listen to the CIA podcast. What was the cocaine money drying up? So you got to get into podcasting. And I wonder what the first topic of discussion will be. How we took the bait from British petroleum vampire dickheads to overthrow the Iranian government. And that is, of course, assuming that the entire podcast won't be redacted and classified information. All right, guys, this is the Langley Files. Yeah, today we're going to be talking about the Iran-Contra scandal, but first of all, I want to tell you about Raid Shadow Legends. It's a real-time fantasy game, and you can send pawns to die without risking your own life. No drug trafficking, though, but we'll get into that in the next patch for the game. Waka waka. Hey, Langley, I know you're listening, so, go fuck yourselves. For an American who learned long ago that loving his country does not mean loving his government. Okay, let's see. Got some comments here. Carl Winters, servant of Jesus Christ. I swear I read that as Carl Weathers, servant of Jesus Christ, for a second. Yeah, you got a bone, some vegetables, you got a stew going, baby. Did I hear of Jeff Durbin? He has 5 black belts. Would you mind checking it out and make a video at some point? I will look into him. Thank you. Yeah, like I said, I'm kind of putting videos on hold because I got a lot of shit to do for work. But the good thing is, I am approaching the end of my yearly lesson plans. Like, I'm on unit 4 of 4, and in the next few days, I'll probably, well, when I say a few days, I mean the next like week or two, I will finish with all lesson plans for the year. And then, I got to do bullshit like SGOs and, all that. But yeah, hopefully when that's done, I can make proper videos and podcasting. And then hopefully when that's done, I'll finally get the stupid certification, start making real money. Yes, I have been getting half pay for the past 3 weeks. I can finally start getting my groove on. Okay, C Punk Messiah says apparently Russia only trains their Spetsnaz well. General military is apparently not very good. Yes, so I've heard. Anyway, let's leave America behind again and check out Old Blighty. What is going on in Britbong land? In Leicestershire, England, Hindus and Muslims brawl in the streets. Diversity, it's wonderful, isn't it? Okay, so this is a rather unpopular opinion again, but I'm going to say it again. I think India would have been much better off if the Sikhs had taken over and consolidated their power. Like, goddamn it, Britain, I know you have to do your imperialism. Couldn't have waited like another 20 years till the Sikhs took over the whole subcontinent and smacked some law and order into the place, and then you imperialized it? I mean, hell, if they had united if the whole subcontinent had united under the benevolent gaze of Ekankar and the Five Virtues, I don't think the British would have made as much headway as they did. I really don't. Ah, well, at least the Sikhs earned the title of being a martial people, a warrior race by the imperializers. Yeah, that and $1 will buy you a cup of coffee. The war nerd, John Dolan, has a pretty neat article a while back about how a lot of the people who were deemed as warrior races are basically people who were downtrodden and had no other outlets but the military, or they had to essentially become martialized people due to living in highly violent areas. There was never a coward where the shamrock grows and all that. It's remarkably easy to get these people to be loyal cannon fodder. All you gotta do is just stroke their egos about being a martial race, give them a nice hat, and there you go. And sometimes you don't even have to give them a hat. Because guess what ethnicity is overrepresented in American Special Forces? That's right, Native Americans. I do have to ask whether this is a nature versus nurture thing. Because, on the one hand, the whipsaw of conquest and flattery certainly exists. But on the other hand, I can't help but feel that small unit guerrilla warfare tactics are kind of their thing on a cultural level. And we'll get back to the Native Americans in a little while. But of course, as with all things imperial, America's version is penny ante stuff, and the British are the masters of it. They literally had textbooks in their civil service about how best to destabilize the nation they're conquering. And presumably they had textbooks about how best to give the defeated martial peoples verbal hand jobs they would fight for you. Remind me, how does the song It's a Long Way to Tipperary start? Paddy wrote a letter to his Irish Molly-o, saying if you don't receive it, write and let me know. Yep, you stroke their ego for bravery, then make sure to drop a dumb Paddy joke in there as well. Not entirely sure if they did songs like that for the Sikhs and the Gurkhas, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I mean, all I'm saying is there's a lot of guys named Singh who win Victoria Crosses. Let's check out some comments. Okay. Carl Winters says all of Europe is being invaded by Islam. Yes, yes, it is. C. Punk Messiah says he wants the dojo storm just as Dan Hibiki. Yes, please do. I'll film it if you want to arrange that. Anyway, let's leave North India, the Punjab. Let's go see what their cousins are doing. Their Indo-Aryan cousins, that is. Let's see what's afoot in Iran. It's big news coming out of Iran, as you've noticed. In Iran, women are cutting their hair and burning their hijabs in protest. And frankly, I'm all for women getting naked, slender as cypresses, radiant as the moon. And whoops, sorry, I was quoting Khayyam for a second. In all seriousness, what happened? A 22-year-old woman named Masa Amini was beaten to death by the Basij, the religious police, for not having her head covered. And the streets of Tehran are full of protesters. Women are throwing down their burqas in protest. Will this amount to anything? I don't know. It seems like Iran has massive city-rending protests fairly frequently. They just kind of peter out every so often. Let's hope for the best. I mean, I wouldn't mind visiting Iran at some point, but that would require Iran to not be a raging dumpster fire. I don't know if they can pull that off, but let's hope for the best. Okay, let's see. Biff Sankovich says the Dow at almost 500 points. How's your Bitcoin doing now? Well, before I get to the rest of your comments, sir, I actually sold off my cryptos because Bitcoin has just been precipitously plummeting. NFTs are basically worthless now. Like I think cryptocurrency is basically kind of shitting the bed. I actually sold off most of all my cryptos. Actually, I'm going to invest in stocks from henceforth. My stocks are doing pretty good. Yeah, let's see. Unemployment is going up, recession is up, home interest rates up. Yes, I mean, but those things, it's not like they were good before, Biff. I mean, I've talked about those things before. I mean, I don't think they've really changed that much. Yeah, the economy's been crap for a while. Ponythroat says Hellraiser 7 Hell World. That's the Hellraiser I was referring to. Had a group of teenagers playing a Cenobite-themed MMO. They go to a theme party where Pinhead hacks people apart with a meat cleaver while making puns. Yeah, I don't know why. First of all, why is Pinhead making puns? And secondly, why is he using a cleaver? Like, again, like that's a prime example of how nobody understood the point of the movies, on that Hellraiser 7. Again, like I do legitimately think that was just a random script that had nothing to do with Hellraiser. They just kind of shoehorned in. Pointy Throat says regarding to cryptocurrency, Ethereum is becoming unmineable. GPU prices are plummeting. Yeah, like crypto's done. All right. I mean, I called it years ago. It's like it doesn't have any inherent worth. Like it doesn't. It's gonna crash eventually. It seems like it's happening now. I'm not gonna lie. If Bitcoin drops down to like 1,000, I might buy a couple, just in the event that it might go back up. But I don't have hopes, honestly. But yeah, speaking of Native Americans, like I mentioned before, there's a new interpretation of American history. A Finnish researcher from Oxford, a Pekka Hamalainen, is writing a book called, I believe he's written a book actually, called Indigenous Continent. It comes up with this groundbreaking thesis that the conquest of the USA was not inevitable, and in fact, the Indians fought tooth and nail against it. So, in other words, it's literally the exact same interpretation of history that Frederick Jackson Turner or Frederick Remington or Teddy Roosevelt would have given of American history. I mean, I'm not against this whole concept. I mean, I certainly respect the valor and ferocity of the indigents, as any red blooded American boy undoubtedly does. But I have no idea why anybody would think this is some new paradigm of historiography. By the way, I love having a guy from Finland lecturing me about the oppression of the indigents. I mean, would he like if I wrote a history about the oppression of the Sami and the Laplanders? Kidding, of course. One second, I got a text message. But yeah, this is nothing new. I mean, it's good, I guess. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to hear endless stories of victimization and weakness. Whenever I read some article whining about how, oh no, you can't stereotype us as a warrior race, that's offensive, my eyes roll through the back of my skull. Like, yeah, try being Chinese, try being stereotyped as a race of effeminate, waddling servant fags. Hmm, yeah, seems like being stereotyped as a warrior race would be a lot better. The book goes on, or the review rather. In fact, on many occasions, the Indians defeated the white man in battle. You don't say. I mean, no shit. Why do you think we name our helicopters and things after the tribes? It's not because they rolled over and died easily. Hello. Again, I'm not going to blame the guy for writing this. I'm sure it's a good book, but it's like, is any of this at all different from what John Ford would have told you? Like, why is this? I just don't understand why you would do something that's old and been done to death, and then you're just rediscovering it. It's like, oh, I invented something new. I don't get it. So yeah, I might check this book out actually. I say as if I haven't been putting off reading Empire of the Summer Moon for the past year or so. But I can't help but feel that this book might have a bit of a backlash. Namely, if you put the focus on American Indians' strength and ferocity and valor and the terror that settlers lived in from them, that might make them seem like somewhat less of victims. And it might make it seem like white Americans actually have to struggle and work hard to conquer the continent. And heaven forbid we have that. I mean, America's situation as it is now is in part due to the fact that, we're taught to believe that America was literally just dropped out of the sky as a big open air shopping mall that anybody can just waltz into and exploit at will. In all seriousness, for good and bad, there was certainly plenty of both on the frontier. The conquest of America was a tremendous undertaking that couldn't have been done by just any group of idiots. And like it or not, that is our heritage. That is our history. That is our culture as a nation, for good and bad. I mean, why else would so many Europeans be enamored with the Wild West? As illustrated by the fact that Oxford has a whole research department on the topic. Oh, yeah, and remind me, what's Italy's #1 comic book? Oh, that's right, Tex Willer, a Western. And yeah, I'll never stop being amused at how the anti Western backlash in the '70s pretty much destroyed the careers of Native American actors, because apparently nobody could conceive of them doing anything besides period pieces. So you dismantle the admittedly romanticized Western mythos and you replace it with nothing. Derp. Let's check out the comments. Funny Thought says, talking RTX 3070 GPUs for $300. Yeah, the cryptocurrency mining is done. Cpunk Messiah says, get wrecked, crypto cons. And then he says, the Comanche were vicious as hell. Yes, they were. Again, the fact that this guy thinks that, like, writing about this is somehow new and exciting, I just don't understand how you could have missed, like, literally hundreds of years of history and, like, pop culture depictions. So, hey, look, I invented this thing that literally hundreds of people have done before. But for what it's worth, I think this book will, at the very least, be, well written and won't be pseudo history nonsense like the 1619 project that Nicole Hannah Jones or Ida B. Wells or whatever the hell her name is wrote. Yeah, I will probably check out indigenous content at some point when I'm done reading the other stuff I'm supposed to read. Meanwhile, let's not talking about the frontier. We'll go to the modern day West, California. The San Francisco Bicycle Coalition says people should stop calling the police about stolen bikes, since doing so hurts the feelings of black and brown people. Are you in fact implying that black people are the ones stealing all the bikes? The reason that they're doing this, it seems to be, this is all part of dismantling bicycle white supremacy. Okay, this is ridiculous. Riding bicycles is white supremacy now. A foot powered vehicle that costs about $100 is white supremacy. Does white supremacy mean anything anymore? Okay, please show me where the law says black people aren't allowed to ride bikes. In fact, in the area where I live, I see plenty of Hispanic dudes going whole hog on the bike thing. Not just riding bikes, but they're wearing those fruity little bike outfits, which, even I don't wear. So clearly, bike supremacy is not stopping those particular brown people from living the bike life. And now, finally, some pop culture news. First of all, a quickie before I get to the big pop culture bit I want to talk about. Pictures have been released of MCU Namor the Submariner, and he looks like absolute shit. I said it before, and I'll say it again. He looks like a gay carnival dancer. My regards to the Marvel comic artists who have to draw this costume for the next year or so. You thought the '70s disco costume was bad. I mean, you had a character whose two main costumes are either Speedo Man or like disco shirtless vest with like little wings on it, and somehow you made a costume that's worse than either of those things. Bravo MCU, bravo. Okay, let's see. Rick says he's going to point a lot of Bond Dessinés did westerns, and you mentioned Tex Willer. Well, Bond Dessinés are French comics. Tex Willer's Italian, but yeah, there's a lot of French comics that are westerns too. Le Ballade de Danton, Lucky Luke, Blueberry, all that shit. Yeah, a lot of westerns. Okay, Carl Winters says playing the race card. LOL, it's ridiculous. With regards to the bikes, yeah, it sure is. C-Punk Messiah says, talking about westerns, imagine if Bruce Lee became Kwai Chang Caine instead of David Carradine. It would have been way better. Yes, the whole history of whether or not Bruce Lee came up with the kung fu TV show idea is a little murky from what I read in that biography of his. It seems to me like he came up with like a vague idea about like there's gonna be a guy in the West and he's doing kung fu, but it was really just like it was an elevator pitch, and then he didn't. A lot of the details of the finished product were not mentioned in that pitch, so I don't know whether or not he can be credited with it or not. But yes, he did audition for the role and he was rejected. Anyway, the big pop culture news I want to talk about is that Amazon abandons a Conan the Barbarian show because it's too much toxic masculinity. So for several years, Amazon has wanted to have their Game of Thrones, like an adult-specific fantasy smash hit. They got that Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, which is good for families, allegedly, but they wanted something specific for adults. They had apparently been storyboarding a Conan the Barbarian show. From what I've read, the scripts that were pitched were actually pretty good. I didn't read the scripts, but I've read articles about it. And yeah, apparently the scripts were pretty good. They were accurate to the source material and they were just well written. Granted, Conan's record as an ongoing TV serial has not been great. I mean, the cartoon was okay. It was obviously toned down for the kids. And what the actual hell was that Rolf Moeller show they had in the 90s? But yeah, those scripts were apparently pretty good. They were accurate to the story, starting with Conan as a 17, 18-year-old, then becoming king when he was, in his 30s and what have you. But then what happened? Some hatchet-faced schoolmarm named Jennifer Salk came to the company to clean up the joint, both in terms of finances and morality. And she felt that Conan was too toxically masculine, and the show was canceled. And then they tried to square the circle and make Rings of Power their adult smash hit fantasy show. And from what I hear, uh, House of the Dragon's pretty good. I'll leave it at that. Yeah, Rings of Power sucks the big one. Yeah, way to screw the pooch on this one, Bezos. I would also like to point out that Cartoon Network's new hit show is Primal, an Emmy Award winning animated adult drama that's literally about a Neanderthal grunting and screaming and killing things in the goriest ways imaginable. Clearly, there's an audience for this sort of thing. If people nowadays had balls, they would do a whole goddamn Howard verse on TV. And yes, remember that I once made a joke about organizing Howard's cosmology into a coherent narrative, 30-minute long tone poem. I did that in some article, some video. I don't remember which one off the top of my head. But yeah, I'm serious here. You could totally do the Robert Howard cinematic universe. Just as the MCU didn't start off with Spider-Man or the Hulk, it started off with the relatively obscure Iron Man. You could start off not with Conan, not even with Solomon Kane, but with like, I don't know, James Allison stories. A man on his deathbed remembers his past lives, all of which were an unerring chain of hypermuscular barbarians, the yellow-haired sons of Arius. Yeah, maybe we could change that last detail a little bit. The Valley of the Worm, the Garden of Fear, those other stories that I haven't read because they're not in the public domain yet. All of Howard's stories take place in the same universe, just in different time periods up until the present day, the 1920s, which is to say, so you could tie them all together. Although, let's be honest, I don't know if you could feasibly tie Sailboat Steve into the rest of the Howard mythos. When I say Sailboat Steve, I am, of course, referring to Sailor Steve Costigan, who is a sailor man who punches people, and that's about it. They're kind of goofy because the guy's written to be a complete moron who's just really good at knocking people the fuck out. And, I like them, but they're kind of tonally different from the rest of the Howard mythos. I mean, if you want to shove him in, like maybe as just like a mid-season kind of breather episode. Then from there, you get your Cole the Conqueror, your Conan, your Solomon Kane. You can put in the horror stories and the historical stories he did. It all ties together to a unified cosmology. Because, as is heavily implied, The people and places of the Hyborian and Atlantean ages will become the mythologies of the future. There is something I find deeply amusing about the idea that the Conan franchise is so overwhelmingly masculine and cool that cannot be crapped up with the message. Any attempt at doing so will just destroy it, so they eschew it completely. So thankfully, we will not see, what is best in life: to crush the patriarchy, see women promoted to girl boss slay queens, and to hear the lamentations of the incels. Yeah, I don't understand why Amazon doesn't realize that The Boys is their big breakout hit. I mean, it's not a traditional fantasy, but why does it have to be a traditional fantasy? I mean, it's certainly not something that is family friendly. But I think it has pretty big mainstream appeal, at least from all the memes and what have you that I see. Even guys in my dojo were talking about The Boys. Yeah, not too bad for a comic book from 15 years ago, published by Dynamite. Let's check out some comments. Okay. Yes, Pony Throat says David Carradine died while doing his best impression of a shirt. Biff Stankovic says Nevada Smith is good. Yes, it is. Even though Steve McQueen is clearly supposed to be playing like a teenager, even though he's like 30. Hey, C Punk Messiah says more men need to know what is best in life. Yes. And he also points out that Conan has male and female empowerment. Yes. The Conan movies and the books have plenty of strong women, but they just didn't have to emasculate men. You can be a strong woman without being a castrating schoolmarm. A lot of women don't seem to understand that. All right, so that does it for my prepared remarks. So, you people have something to say, you can say it now. Okay, looks like nobody has anything else to say. So for Larsen Halleck, I'm Larsen Halleck. I'd like to point out that I will not be doing a live stream next week because I have a family thing I have to deal with. It's nothing bad. My parents are getting rid of some stuff, so I got to move some crap around and help them sell it. So yeah, I will see you people.